Is that Blair?
It will be me. Thank you,
Oh,
Manderly.
sorry, Lisa.
No worries.
Sorry.
Well, thank you, everybody. Welcome to today's presentation, Adult Education, a Gateway to College and Living Wage Employment. Again, we really are grateful for you joining us on this Monday for a 2.5-hour webinar and over your lunch break. Please don't worry, we will be taking a break and we will also be engaging in good conversation. To begin, let's start with some introductions to our team. So next slide, please. All right. As our team introduces ourselves, please also take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat with your name, your role, and your organization. I'll begin. I'm Lisa Lefevre. I'm a Senior Program Associate at West Ed, and we'll get more into what we do at West Ed in the next slide. But right now, I'd like to turn it over to our presenters to say a quick hello. Blair?
Hi, thanks for joining us. I'm Blair Wilson Toso. Many of you on this I recognize the names in this group who's joined us today. So many of you are familiar. I have a long background in adult education, English as a second language, and immigrant integration. Have done a lot of work on career pathways. Started out as an ESL teacher and have wound myself up the career pathway, since that's what we're talking about today. And now do consulting work. I've worked at West Ed previously, and I'm now hopping in and out of projects as needed. So I'll hand it over to Alexandria.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I am Alex Wright with West Ed Center for Economic Mobility, and looking forward to a great session here. Last year, Blair and I toured the state of California, given this session in person to multiple consortia. So I certainly hope you get the most out of it. I myself am not as the expert as Dr. Blair Wilson Toso is in an adult ed. However, I have been working with adult education my entire career. I am a regional economist, a labor economist. I spent a dozen years running economic and workforce development divisions at community colleges. And I oversaw adult ed for that. And so I had the great honor and privilege of working with some fantastic adult education directors, and particularly around the time where we were really starting to engage in adult education, IET and IELCE training. During that bridge, as we were coming out of IBEST and getting into IET. So it was really a match made in heaven. I absolutely adore adult education directors, and faculty and administrators. And I really do appreciate being able to work with them with their expertise and being able to harness all of those things that you need in order to add that value in the labor market to those adult learners as they move through these programs and getting them that integrated education and training. So thank you so much for having us. I'll hand it back to Dr. Lefevre.
Great, thank you. And last but not least, we also have another member on our team joining us today, Suzanne, who's been instrumental in helping us with all the data collection analysis, and especially appreciate her expertise. We'd also like to take this moment to recognize the CAPE team from the Chancellor's Office, Myra Diaz and Cora Rainey, and the CDE team, Dr. Caroline Zacher, Diana Batista, Neil Kelly, who support this work to ensure quality adult education. And I can take a moment and say, Cora, would you like to say a quick hello? Either team, Diana or Cora, or both.
Sure, I'll start. Hey everyone, thank you so much for attending today's session. My name is Cora Rainey, and I am the program manager for the Adult Ed program at the Chancellor's Office. And I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Sanjay to introduce himself.
Good morning, everybody. Glad you're here. Sanjay Mehta. I'm the Adult Ed program analyst at the Chancellor's Office, and I'm so glad to be here with you all. I'm going to now hand it over to CDE, Diana Batista.
Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to be here. I'm excited to hear about this program. What a great opportunity. I'm one of the program consultants at CDE, and Neil Kelly, unfortunately, is not with us today, but I'll be sharing my notes with him. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Diana. And, we also have to say a big thank you to the SCOE TAP team who've helped to make today's event possible. They are flawless in their support in organizing and taking care of all the big and small details of ensuring the presentation runs smoothly. Finally, on the next slide, we're going to go over a little bit more about WestEd. WestEd is an education research, technical assistance, and development agency. WestEd offers a multitude of projects and content. The Economic Mobility Post-Secondary and Workforce System team, which we are part of, focuses on providing technical assistance and professional development and engaging a broad intersection of the field to work that supports economic stability, individual, family, and community well-being. That said, let's get started. I'd like to hand it over to Blair, who will review the agenda and move us into the content of our interactive webinar today. Blair.
Thank you. There's the agenda up on the screen. I will not be reading through it. Just take a look at it. I do want to say that we'll be moving through the content quickly. As Alexandria noted, that we have done this a series last year, and we've really refined the content. And it was 5 hours, and we really have taken a lot of we've just kept the meat of the presentation, but it's going to be a lot of information. And we're going to cover the why we're doing this work, the data sources that one can use to build career pathways for relevant sectors in your area. We'd really like to engage you and hope that you will engage with us by asking questions, sharing your knowledge and your experience in this area. We have a lot of experience, but we also know that everyone comes here with their own experience, especially as you've been building your own pathways and exploring your data and consortium goals. So we're informal in our presentation. Feel free to come off mute, raise your hand, put a question in the chat. And lastly, I'll just say, because of the fast pace, we are offering follow-up coaching and TA. So please feel free to reach out to us to request time to revisit or help you identify, analyze, and develop programming that is related to sector-based career pathways and programming after we're done with this presentation. Next slide, please. As you can see by the goals on the slide, our intention is really to learn more about how to build data-informed career pathways and programming that supports adult learners prepare for good jobs, and jobs that includes jobs that are living wage. And sometimes that intention starts from a place where you may not have a living wage job, but the pathway helps us to grow our programming so that the learner can eventually meet that criteria of a good job. Next slide, please. So we have a lot of documents that we will be referring to and that you want to access throughout this presentation, and then also have available to you after this presentation. We just put the link to the folder in the chat. So if you want to take a moment to please access the folder and let us know if you are able to access that. All right, let's go to the next slide. Just pop it in the chat if people are having a problem. So we like to start out with centering ourselves at why are we doing pathways and why are we looking at it as a gateway to college? Well, we really are thinking about building an educational ladder that validates students' work experience as an essential part of their educational journey, right? And achieve that the good jobs, right? Which include stable work schedules, increased pay, those better jobs, job security and benefits, rates of employment, and stronger employment retention. On the screen, you can see that there's an increased opportunity for a living wage jobs as one gains education. The relevance of particularly the post-secondary non-degree award, which we think is important to be sure to include as you think about a pathway. But it's important to remember that the pathway is not a single program. Rather, it's a building of other experiences, trainings, and educational opportunities so that a student who may choose not to go beyond one educational experience can stop out. However, it also, by building that pathway, builds the offering and the culture of a pathway for learners who want to continue, or if you are transparent and continue that thinking and embed it in your programming, that the student who does maybe leave for a job can then return later on in their lives and understand the process. Next slide, please. So the Urban Institute defined a career pathway as a schematic or a mapped series of manageable education and training steps towards industry-aligned skills, credentials, and career advancement. That's really important, right? It's that manageable education, the training steps and the industry aligned skills and credentials for career advancement. Here, some of the key characteristics of a career pathway are that they're purposeful, progressive. You can see the entry and exit points. And when you're doing that, you're thinking about stackable and what's the timing of those. The career pathway is meant to meet adults at all levels, right? So whether you start at a bridge program or you are moving along up into apprenticeships or IETs, those integrated education and training programs, or other aspects of programming that go along the line. You want to think about the whole trajectory. We think about career pathway systems as partnerships. You're not in it alone, nor should you be in it alone. And I was delighted to see there's a good mix of people, consortium directors and instructors on the webinar. And it's really important that we all think about this as a partnership as well as our stakeholders. Your career pathway systems include support services, which you are all very fully aware of. And then the piece that I really like to highlight are those very clear transition points, right? And then the information that always goes into supporting people. Many of you already have career navigators, and those have been found to be key to supporting good transitions. And we really think about it as a many-to-many principle, right? It's not just one thing. And Alexandra will talk about this later. The way we think about a career pathway, while it's a trajectory here, a single arrow, we're really thinking more about subways. And you'll see that as we talk about our career pathways map, is where do you branch in and out to other jobs and opportunities, maybe not even in the sector that you've planned for, but how do you support that? Next slide, please. So we have, in order to help inform and develop career pathways and programming that aligns to local labor market needs and opportunities, we came up with an opportunity map idea so that we can create transparent and informative maps for ourselves as we develop programming, but also one that can reach out to the adult learners. So these maps are made to create a one-page look at a pathway through a sector, and that should include a variety of opportunities and we have organized them by educational levels. So, and if you look closely, I know sometimes it's hard to see, and Holly put the link to the opportunity map, so if you want to take a closer look at it. But you can see that it includes details such as medium wages. So an adult learner thinking about a job can be fully apprised as to what they might be able to expect as they plan their future. It includes foundational and technical and transferable skills. The transferable skills are right down there at the bottom. If I had my druthers, they'd be much bigger, but it's an awful lot of information to put on there. But those are equally as important while you're talking about adult learners, because we know they may choose to move from one area of study to another, or in one area, sector to another, or job to another. So keeping an eye on those transferable skills are also really important. The reason why we highlight foundational, technical, and transferable skills is so that we can build those skills which can be translated to other job families, and then also target them. Say if you're doing a bridge class or a preparation course, that you also take a look at those skills and include them in those prep courses or the bridging courses. All right, next slide, please. So one of the ways that we have found that people have been able to explore and understand a career pathway map is to create your own and think about your own career pathway. So we're going to move into an activity where you spend a few minutes reflecting on and charting your own career pathway. Next slide. So here's an example of it, right? This is one that one of us created, and it talked about, and you filled in, you took the little sticky notes and filled them in and pasted them onto this map. And you can see where they were tracing what they were doing, like what did they do, where did they go to high school, what kind of training did they have, what about their volunteer experiences, and then how they threaded through their career pathway. So you'll notice that not all the boxes are filled out. Our pathways are individual and they don't always fit into neat boxes. So if you want to just take this and jot it down as you look at this slide, or you can access the personal career pathway map through the link that has Holly posted in the chat. Go to the next slide, please. So here are the directions. You just want to take a few minutes, chart your career pathway, include your on and off ramps related to your journey, branches into or from other sectors or educational pathways, and then any employment or unrelated employment opportunities, such as volunteer opportunities related to your pathway. So we'll give you about 3 to 5 minutes to go ahead and think about it and plot it out. Thank you. Can we go ahead and forward through? I appreciate you backing up to the blank map that people could use as an example. All right, and let's move forward one more slide. All right, I'd like to, if people would come off, somebody volunteer to come off and talk a little bit about what you did for your career pathway, and then how your career pathway fit onto that template. Okay, I'm an ESL teacher, so I can call on people, and I'm hoping somebody would volunteer instead.
Hi, this is Molly.
Thank you, Molly. Yay! You won the first prize.
Well, I appreciate all the help that I get from the folks on this call, so I will do this. I was the first in my family to finish university, and thought really that I was going to get through in 4 years. I really enjoyed doing all the different kinds of activities. I always worked. I had a couple of jobs in college, and then thought that I would work in the business world, sales, and in hotels. And I worked there for a little while and realized that it's not fun if it has to be work. So the fun stuff that I liked doing related to social outreach and all that kind of stuff, when it came to sales, wasn't very fun. And I'd been told for a long time that I'd be a good teacher. So I decided to go that route, and and that actually ended up being where I was for many, many years in a variety of jobs, roles. So I started as there's no way that I was going to be working with very little people. What I wanted to do was work with teenagers, high school kids. I didn't think I was smart enough to work for a college, a community college, but ultimately I'd like to be able to do that. So anyway, I did start in the high school area, and where I ended up was over 20 years in kindergarten, preschool, those kinds of things, the place I never thought I would be. But just through different life choices and things that were happening with family, that's where I was. Then I also transitioned into administration and leadership because I liked being with people and working together. But I thought there's no way I would be a school principal or work at a middle school. And that's what I did, both of those. And after doing those, I realized, yep, there's a reason I didn't want to do those. I was right. So I went to teach in the classroom again, and then realized that I wanted to stretch in a different kind of way, and was successful in being hired for Shasta College. So it's been a little here, a little there, but the common theme, I think, is working with other people and encouraging and trying to solve problems that help lift other people up. Is that kind of what you're looking for?
Yeah, that was perfect. We have all of our own journeys, and the way people talk about their personal pathway map is always different. So thank you so much for sharing. Yes, Diane, I agree. Lots of applause for Molly coming off. And it's interesting that you found your theme, right? Even though you may not have fit onto a direct pathway, when you ended up in places that you did not anticipate, it's interesting how it takes that turn, right, for us along the pathway.
So I think part of that that you're describing helps me see it in others as well, and give a little bit of grace for what and encouragement for them and what that can be. And I know that everybody goes through hard times, but I truly believe we're here to help each other, and we really have a lot more going for us when we work together. So I love the work I'm doing now, and it wouldn't be the same if I had started doing this 25 years ago. I had a lot of other experiences that helped.
Yeah, thank you, Molly. I think you point out one of the real key pieces of this pathway map activity is when we map our own pathways, it gives us grace about other people because we so often think about those linear pathways. So many of ours are not linear. And it helps us to also then think about and inform how we might craft a pathway system for the adult learners in our programs and across our consortia. So thank you. You said that beautifully. And I was just curious, does anybody else want to talk about how you might be able to use this career pathway to inform your work? And it could be with the adult learner, as in that last question, or with planning in your consortium, or just within your program, or talking with partners. Okay, I see Shannon.
Hi, I was just thinking about my personal pathway, and I think one way it may inform us or help inform us to help students is the motivation behind maybe a pathway that we're choosing. So for instance, I did the typical, I went to high school, completed high school, but throughout my high school career, I did like a workforce experience. Once I turned, I think I was 15 or 16, and I worked with a bookkeeper. So I thought I was going in the direction of business. When I got to community college, I was like, oh, heck no, I do not want to do business. So at that time, you could get the general education AA. So I was doing that. But during that, I married my high school sweetheart, but he was getting a full ride scholarship for basketball to Sac State, and he's a little ahead of me. So my whole motivation during that time was do anything I could to make sure I could follow him wherever he decided to go. So relating that back to our adult ed students, they all have lives outside of school and career too. So I think working with them to find out those interests, those things about their lives. So do they have children? Okay, sure, you want to be a nurse. Here's the career pathway to that, but how are you going to help or, raise your kids in the meantime as well, or get them to school or things like that. So in our area, we're very rural and isolated. I'd be working with those students on figuring out daycare options or what that looks like within their own personal stories. So anyways, that's kind of where my mind went. Because again, then even when we went off to Sac State, he got picked up by a professional basketball team in Europe. So I was trying to finish my degree at Sac State to make sure I could follow him to Germany, which I did. And then I ended up doing an online program so I could stay out there with him for my master's program. And then when I got back, I worked at our community college as an EOPS advisor. And then, and that kind of landed me, actually, even before the EOPS advisor, I worked at Human Services, which was a whole different area in our community that I had no clue about. So I did not realize how much poverty was in our rural area. And that opened my eyes. And then I was the EOPS advisor. And then that's when I came into adult ed too. So it was definitely all these stepping stones of different things that I never thought I really was going to be involved in. But each one really helped me to get to where I am today. but it was with the ulterior motive of my life circumstances.
And Shannon, that's not unusual. Thank you so much for sharing. I mean, you just gave us another beautiful example about how our career pathways shift. And I go back to those transferable skills. And you also talked a lot about needing to build those lifelong learning, independent learning skills as for our adult learners as well as they transition and move back and forth. So thank you so much. If anybody else would like to have something else to say, if you would pop it in the chat, that would be great. I really enjoy hearing about people's experiences because they also inform the work we do and helps us to relate to the adult learners. And I would just say that when you share this kind of story with an adult learner, it also helps them to feel as though they have a place in the career pathway and that they don't necessarily need to know it all or get it all straight right away, or that they can change their minds, that they also get to see that someone who they admire or who they see as a mentor or as their teacher, that they've also made shifts in their lives. So it's a very humanizing activity as well. And so thank you. I'm gonna go ahead and let's move on to the next step. So now that we're thinking about the students, now that we're thinking about pathways, we're going to take a look at who we serve and can serve. And that's really the first step, as you all are probably well familiar with, in understanding and designing a career pathway. So for this example, we are going to be using the North Far North region as our exemplar for this webinar. So you may see data that doesn't reflect or is representative of what you will collect and analyze for your career pathway programming, or it might not align to your local workforce needs and your target learner population, but please take it as the exemplar, and then you would want to tailor what we're going to talk about throughout the rest of this webinar for your local context. Next slide, please. So, right, who are your current students? Importantly, you want to learn who your students are and determine who you are serving, and identify if there are any other additional opportunities, right? Some of the key demographic features you want to look at, as you know, are race, ethnicity, and age. Other data points could be who's transitioning, barriers, attaining workforce goals, and immigrant integration goals. And you could also survey people, your students, and think about their student goals in order to inform all of your career planning pathway discussions. You all keep your data to understand your participants, right? Some of those resources you can use are Launchboard's adult education pipeline data. For example, here, there's also CAPE fact sheets, there's CASAS reports. You can use a wide body of data to inform them of what you want them to do. What you want to do is use that data so you're not presuming you know what's going on, right? If anybody has any additional resources that they use to inform learning about their students and identifying your target demographic, then please go ahead and pop those in the chat. And yes, thank you. I see some great things, that unexperienced life events. Life events are huge for our adult learners. And then yes, thank you. Thanks, Molly, for posting in return to Shannon. Appreciate it. Next slide, please. So, and then you want to look at you want to look at your community and the possibilities for students who you see potential in a career pathway for an in-demand job and living wage or good job. So for example, on this slide, we're looking at data from Lightcast. So as opposed to pulling just your student data, you're now broadening out, and as many of you already do, you're looking at the demographic data of your communities. And we pull from Lightcast, we've used the ACE, American Community Survey and census data. And then you want to look at intersections of this, right? We want to look at intersections such as race and ethnicity alongside age. What does this look like together? Are you finding different groups that you may or may not be serving, that there's opportunity through this? Next slide, please. So, and on this slide, we're looking at the intersection of educational attainment and race and ethnicity for another perspective of how we might want to engage in adult education career pathway programming. Where do you want to start? Who do you want to start with? What kind of educational level do you want to think about, right? Do you need that bridge program? Do you need to push down into your basics or ESL? Or do we want to look at that? Those who are just about on the edge of a high school diploma, or do they need brush up skills, right? Where are they coming to us from? And so are there other pieces that you all have, other data points that you've used to inform programming? Besides educational attainment, race, ethnicity? Yes, Molly says, talking with the students, listing the community agencies that are providing support. Your partnerships, we go right back to that. That is perfect, right? In fact, my next talking point was about reaching out and talking to members of your communities to ensure that the programs are appropriate for your community as well, right? It's great. We can look at all the data we want and think that we've identified an opportunity, but without engaging stakeholders and the students, you won't necessarily know that your great ideas are actually going to come to fruition. And I have worked with programs that have put together these great training programs, and they have not been able to run them, and ultimately because they have not been able to enroll a group of adult learners who were either maybe because they weren't interested, or there were cultural constraints around the occupation, or there weren't enough people who actually met the needed entrance level. So they had to go back and build a bridge program that could help them move into that. So you need to also pay attention what you need to build to ensure success. Do you need to run so specialized vocabulary programs? I've seen people do boot camps so they can move people in, or other services. Yes, thank you. Student technology service. Digital literacy is huge these days. As you all know, it appears on almost every job that you need, as well as in our classrooms along with that. All right, next slide, please. Right, now Alexandra is going to help us look more deeply at the process for career planning. So I'm going to turn it over to Alexandria.
Thank you so much, Blair. All right, so let's get into a little bit of pathway planning here, and the actual kind of fundamentals of when it comes to planning out these educational and career pathways for our students starting in adult education. So we'll go over to the next slide. All right, so here's 3 fundamental elements when it comes to pathway planning, right? What data do we need to identify a pathway beyond the target employment opportunity, right? We always have the immediate things, right? The things about economics is it's a social science, right? So we all live and breathe daily within our economics and our communities, right? But what this is about is diving a little deeper beyond what we see at surface value, right? So local economic and labor market information provides us with that data that we need to understand on high demand jobs in our region that lead to a living wage, right? In those industry sectors that are hiring. One of the most important, I'd say, benefits that comes out of adult education is the contextualized reading, writing, and arithmetic that can occur during an IET or an IELCE program, right? I've been delivering training in rural America and in Indian country my entire career. And I can tell you right now, without contextualized reading, writing, and arithmetic, most rural folks are not going to be as successful as they otherwise would be. So that's why we talk about labor market information, and not just the jobs, but the actual industry sectors that are really, that are showing a lot of growth, that are dominating our local economies, that have those career pathways that lead to living wage jobs. Real-time information is that information which comes from job postings. That's why we call it real time. It's a fancy word for what's going on right now in job postings. So you can see the actual advertisement, you can see the skills and the competencies that people are looking for, right? You can understand the frequency with which job postings are being posted online, right? So that's going to indicate for us, there's lots of variables engaged here, so we have to be careful not to be too assumptive, but it's definitely going to indicate some sort of demand. And finally, when it comes to creating these credentials, right, this entire workshop is really, you know, again, adult education as that gateway to living employment. In order to truly harness that, we need to have industry credentials that are engaged in the education and training, right? And so when we talk about building out these programs like IET and IELCE with plus T within adult education, we want to make sure that the credentials that we're offering have value in and of itself, right? That it's not tied to some other thing that they need to have, because, right, that just creates a barrier for those learners. So we want to make sure, like something like let's see, something like CNA, right? Our certified nursing assistant, that credential has value within and of itself. Just like a community health worker credential has value within and of itself, or a home health aide, right? Versus something that may need to be contiguous to some other type of training, right? Perhaps some sort of computer training where you get your entry level, but you really need that intermediate credential in order to attain that living wage. These credentials should be in short duration, and they should be part of a pathway that's not repetitive. So basically, for those of you who are working particularly closely with your community colleges or at an adult school that's hosted by a community college, we want to make sure that whatever is being provided through that IET or IELCE plus T in the classroom is not going to be repeated. Now remember, if you have a relationship and you're being hosted by your community college, your IET or IELCE plus T could conceivably be a non-credit format or a credit format. It depends on where the culture is at your institution and where the innovation is, right? I've seen it both ways. I'm working with colleges that have both IET and non-credit and in credit. Either way, we want to make sure that once those students complete and they start to transition, they move into their job and they start to transition into higher education, that this credential isn't going to be repeated, right? They're not going to have to take this over again. Repetition is a wonderful part, right, of learning, but it also is not imperative when it comes to attaining that living wage job and moving into that pathway, right? We want to build upon the skills and the competencies, not simply repeat what's already happening. So this has to do with partnerships, right? And making sure that your pathway, whatever pathway you're building out in your adult school, is aligned with your community college partners and your university partners. Okay, we can go to the next slide. All right, so let's get into some labor market data here. Go ahead and go to the next slide. All of the data that you're going to see here, we took a look, right, at what you were, thank you, Blair, and your workforce development partners, thank you. Let us not forget our Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act partners. So it's not just our community colleges, but we also want to ensure that our pathways are built out on what's called the eligible training provider list. I'm not going to distract us with that right now, but we can circle back around and we can talk a little bit more about when we get into the activities about building these pathways and ensuring that there is alignment with our partners, both our educational partners and our workforce partners. So the labor market data that you're seeing here, right? We took a little gander at who was attending today, and we wanted to ensure that this was really specialized to you. So everything that you're seeing here is from the Shasta Tehama Trinity Consortium, okay? With the exception of, I think, a couple of data points where we pulled for North. But for the most part, these are your 3 counties that you're looking at. So the first thing we want to start at when we're talking about building these pathways, right? These pathways to living wage employment, is we want to see what's going on in our industry sectors. The numbers that you see here are the quantity of people employed as of 2022, okay, in the 3 counties in these sectors. And of course, you'll see healthcare is top of the list, right? It usually is in our more rural communities, healthcare and social assistance along with government. You're always going to see that retail trade and food and accommodation, which is lovely, but I'm going to put that over here to the side, right? Because retail trade and food and accommodation, while you could eventually get to that point of living wage, it doesn't start there. right? And it's more of an entrepreneurial pathway. And again, that's a specialty we can talk about in a little bit. We want to stick with those industry sectors that are really established, where we know that we have a continuum into living wage career opportunities, into good jobs is really what we mean. How many here, I'm going to stop for a second. How many here have known and are familiar with the definition of good jobs, the federal definition of good jobs? Give me a thumbs up if you know what that federal definition is of a good job. I'm not seeing any thumbs. All right. And feel free to put it in the chat if you do. So let's talk about what a good job is, right? A good job is not just a living wage, it's healthcare benefits and full benefits, right? That is our federal definition of a good job, right? It's coming through everything. So again, when you look at your top industry sectors, what we're really trying to understand here are, where should we target our efforts? Where are those career pathways that lead to good jobs? And furthermore, how are we going to contextualize our basic skills in order to prepare people for success in these career pathways? So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. All right. So now we're looking at our top skills, okay? And again, I put these slides together for a reason, right? They're next to one another. They're in proximity to one another for a reason. You can see here, what we're looking for is specialized skills. We understand the transferable skills that Dr. Toso spoke about earlier, right? And how those really need to be at the top of the list. But we have to understand it's not just the skills that are transferable. We really want to contextualize those skills. Again, the reading comprehension, right, and the mathematics vary from healthcare to manufacturing to transportation and logistics, right? So to agriculture, to construction. So we want to be aware of what's going on with our skills. So what you're seeing here in terms of skills is, over the past year, from January 1, 2023 to December 31, 2023, we looked at online job postings. So here's your real-time data, right? And those numbers that you see in there is the frequency with which that skill was posted in the Shasta, Tehama, Trinity counties, in that entire economic region. Of course, communication is number one, right? Customer service, of course, right up there. And then you get into those kind of more technical specialized skills like nursing, right? Basic life support, your driver's license, right? But then we circle back around and we see these generalizable kind of skills, the management, the operations, the sales, the leadership, the planning, right? Planning is a lot of that critical thinking. And those are the types of exercises that can be included when you're in those adult education job training programs, be it a pre-apprenticeship model that also offers, an IET or an IELCE plus T, or is it a pre-apprenticeship model that simply prepares someone to go into a credit-bearing pathway or a non-credit-bearing pathway, right? Either way, we want to make sure that we're contextualizing those very fundamental basic skills to the local industry sectors. Hey, let's face it, in the modern era, 21st century pedagogy and andragogy says people want learning to be personalized, productive, right? They want it to be something that they can actually apply, that applied learning, right? Much less abstract than we used to be in the olden days. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, so we're going to walk through 3 slides. And this is what we're going to do as an exercise together when we get into our California Adult Education Career Pathway Dashboard. I know that's a mouthful, but trust me, you're going to love it. It's very, very user-friendly. So we start with the largest occupations, right? These ones that we're looking at require an associate's degree. So it looks like we filtered all of this according to associate's degree. Typically what we do and what we're going to be able to do in the dashboard is we're going to be able to filter to some college, right? Some college or industry credential. And that's really where we start with. But let's take a look at what's going on with our general area here for largest occupations. What you can see here is a 5-year projection for the Shasta, Tehama, Trinity area, right? You're seeing these are the largest quantity of jobs in the region. You see here the 5-year projection where they're expected to increase, right? And then you see here the ones faded are a little bit of a decline. So everything that's faded is showing, oh, I'm sorry, everything that's faded is actually showing a wage that's less than a living wage. So what we did is we looked at living wages just for Shasta County. We look at this through the MIT Living Wage Calculator. We're going to have a link for you in just a little bit, and there is a link on your dashboard that you're going to be using. And what we try to pay attention to are 2 filters. Living wage for one person, no child, right? And so that's the bottom dash line here, that thicker dash line. And so it's $21.93 in Shasta County for a living wage out of the MIT Living Wage Calculator. So this is inclusive of everything from the cost of rent and food and energy to the cost of civic participation, right? That's why it's really, the MIT Living Wage Calculator is really interesting. And they've also recently updated it for inflation. We had that terrible inflation last year in 2023. So it's important for us to keep track of that. The upper dotted line, which is a longer dash, that is for a living wage for a family of 4 with 1 working parent. Okay. And so again, you can see here projections across here for a lot of these jobs that do end up with living wages. Let's go to the next slide here. Let's look at the highest paying occupations that require an associate's degree. Again, you can see here it's the same. We're looking at 5-year projections, 2023 to 2028 growth, right? We're looking at living wages in the lower dash line and in the upper dash line. And along the blue line, you're seeing those median hourly earnings by job, right? So again, we start to build upon it. And we're starting to build upon not just what are the largest jobs. A lot of times we always go to the largest jobs, and we have to remember that in any economy, the largest jobs are going to be entry-level jobs, some of which may be low-skill jobs, even though you could conceivably have a credential that provides a little more value for the worker in the labor market, gives them a little more understanding and proficiency, makes them a little more efficient when they walk in the door, okay? But that said, almost every job, be it manufacturing team assembler, healthcare home health aide or CNA, construction general laborer, right? Those are all going to be slightly lower than living wage, particularly in the state of California. Let's just be honest here, right? So we want to make sure that we're building out a pathway and again, connecting it to the next step with our educational partners or our workforce system partners. We have 2 options there, right? And again, we can dive into that a little bit. What I mean by that is connecting directly to that credit bearing pathway or connecting over here to a pathway that is listed through the eligible training provider list, which will likely be non-credit or credit pathways, but right, they provide the subsidy over here versus directly into education. All right, let's go to the next slide. And this last one you're going to see is just bachelor's occupation. So this is the aspiration, right? There's, as Dr. Toso showed earlier, the best way to design pathways that begin in adult education are multiple on-ramps and multiple off-ramps, right? Because there's just so much, the opportunity cost to go to school is just so much higher in the modern era, right? That opportunity cost, the time taken away from maybe working your second job so you can put food on your table for your family because the cost of rent is so high, right? So there's multiple reasons why we want off-ramps that are easy on-ramps and easy off-ramps, and they can come right back, and this would be the aspirational. This is how we start building this out. So, all right, let's go to the next slide. We have a couple more slides in this labor market area. Looking at this, so this is an interesting one, right? In adult education, you can provide an integrated education and training or an IELCE plus T program, right? That is fairly generic, right? Business administration, so administrative assistants, right? Or billing and posting clerks, right? Billing and posting clerks are something that can be really heavily in demand in various industry sectors. And what we're looking at here is one of my favorites in terms of being able to understand the context of our economy. So what we're seeing here is that in the Shasta, Tehama, Trinity counties in 2023, Billing and posting clerks were almost 60%, right, of those occupations were in healthcare in that region. So that tells us something, that if we wanted to start a credential program for billing and posting, right, your kind of entry-level credential there, right, I want to say inventory, but it's more like accounting, right, and bookkeeping, right, and posting and timekeeping, all of which are really, really fundamental jobs, but essential jobs, right, in our sectors. Almost 60% of those jobs are sitting in healthcare. A little over 8% are sitting in professional, scientific, and technical services. So what that means is your professional architecture firms, your professional engineering firms, right? Your professional biotech firms, right? Typically independently owned or private sector. 7.7% of these jobs are sitting over in government, right? And then finally, 4.7% of these jobs sit in a sector that's very oddly combined administrative support and waste management and remediation services. Please forgive us. The U.S. Department of Commerce created these sectors decades and decades ago, and they have yet to update them at all. Otherwise, this should certainly be separated. But the point here is that it's contextualized. So you know darn well that if you wanted to do an industry credential, and like I said, that billing and posting and that timekeeping, contextualizing it to the healthcare environment would probably really set your students up for your success. Those learners would be familiar. I have a theory of change that I approach. How many of us hear from employers saying, man, if I could just get somebody to show up on time, I just need a warm body, right? I just need a warm body and I can train them. Well, the theory of change is this. As educators, we can't necessarily force somebody to turn up to work on time, right? Or to make sure that they're presentable and that they're wearing clean clothes, or that they have a work ethic. But what we can do is make sure that they receive contextualized reading, writing, and arithmetic, contextualized learning that helps them become familiarized. And furthermore, let us not forget that in adult education, work-based learning is absolutely a possibility. Getting these folks on a tour of a local facility, helping them understand the environment they're going to be in, the contextualized learning and the physical experience of that environment are likely going to increase the probability that that person's going to be retained when they get that first job. All right, so we've kind of gone through, we can go to the next slide, and we've gone through several of these. There are lots of data thrown at you right now, but I want to take a pause here and just recall what we went through. Thinking about LMI, labor market information, how does it inform pathway development? How does it inform training content? And how does it inform the employment opportunities along the pathway? So we've now reviewed, how does the LMI inform the pathway development? We got to filter. We have to look at those jobs that are requiring some college, right? Or an industry credential. Then we look at those, and you can always start too, right? We are adult ed, we're Title II. You can start with those jobs that require a high school diploma or GED, right? That's where it begins. Then it's what jobs are requiring some college or a credential. Then what jobs require an associate's. Then what jobs require a bachelor, right? That's going to really tune us in to what the pathway should be, right? It's going to inform training content, particularly from the context of those industry sectors, right? It's going to give us the context for the reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? And those activities so that we make sure learning in the classroom is participatory and productive and personalized, right? Very applied learning. And then furthermore, how can LMI inform the opportunities along the pathway? That goes back to the first bubble, right? Hey, wait a minute, I'm seeing that there's certain jobs that require a high school diploma, GED. When we get this person out of that GED, we can help them get that job. But let's make sure they come back, right, for their industry training, for that IET. Let's make sure that on-ramp to get back in for that IET, that IELCE plus T is a really accessible on-ramp to get back in. All right, I know there's been lots of chats. Happy to answer any questions, and we're almost just about at break too. So I think we're doing good on time. Janice, yep, absolutely. LMI is required in all planning, both for state of California as well as your federal planning, right through the workforce system. Any questions from the field right now in everything that we went through? Are things making sense to you? Was it too fast? Is there something that you'd like to dive a little deeper into when we get into our exercises? You got a good place? All right, good, good, good. I will take that. Okay, I'm going to hand it back over to Dr. Toso right now.
And I have the wonderful job of saying, can you move the slide forward, please? And calling for a 10-minute break. So we're at, why don't we take an 11-minute break? We are at 1 to the hour, so let's come back at 10 minutes past the hour. So we'll see you in a few minutes. Right, welcome back, everyone. Are you all still chewing? We're just at noon, 10 past noon, so I'm sure everybody was hoping that they'd get a little more time to eat, but we'll pass through this and feel free to eat on camera, eat off camera, and see if we've got, if I could get a thumbs up for people, if people are back in the room. All right, thanks, Janae. And Iva, or is, I believe, and Holly. All right, well, I'll take 3. We'll go 3 and I presume that other people are back. I wanted to just really quickly draw attention to a question that was put in the chat over break. Where Cheryl asked to, she'd love to know what other agencies are doing for the student that has never thought past the HSD, HSE. You know, and I think it's a great question. We talk about the pathway, and part of the challenge can also be, how do you get people on the pathway? So if anybody has any thoughts about that, if you could pop them into the chat, that would be great. Or and I'll pass it back to Alexandria, who is now going to help, you know, walk through some steps to pathway planning that pulls different sets of data together to think about. And some of this may be things that you all are already doing, and some of it may be new or spark some new thinking. If you have thoughts or you have experience and want to share them, please put them in the chat. As I said, we all bring a lot of different experience and knowledge to this conversation. So feel free to share that for the good of the group. All right, Alexandria.
Cool, thank you. All right, so let's get into some fundamental steps to pathway. We just went through all the labor market data, right? And all that economic data and the demographic data that helps us kind of compose our thoughts, helps us start to conceptualize. But let's be a little more linear about this. What exactly do we need to start with, right? So step 1 is really about finding that design team, right? Quite honestly, you know, in my career, I was always one of those kind of teams of one, right? I'd get hired by the colleges and then pull in the adult ed, and we were always just scrambling, working together. And it was Dr. Toso who reminded me that, you know what, we got to start. We can't just dive into the data. You got to make your team, right? And this team isn't just your faculty. It's not just your administrators. It's everybody. And you know, recognizing that adult education teams or adult schools in general are typically sparsely populated in terms of fully staffed, right? Full-time staff. But you want to make sure that you get somebody who is working on the outreach, as well as getting somebody who's working on the actual curriculum, as well as your administrator, right? And you want to make sure to find people outside of your organization, right? What about those workforce system partners, right? What about that one-stop staff, that AJCC, you know, deputy director or lead kind of counselor that you've met over time and that you know that has a lot of information about the people that are walking into that AJCC, either looking for upskilling, looking for their you know, filling out their unemployment paperwork, looking for supplementary ESL, etc. So really think about that design team and the role that they play. You know, I just mentioned a few. Obviously, the instructors are going to be designing that curriculum, right? But then what about those coordinators that help with a lot of the outreach, right? Remember, this is a different population. That outreach material has to be, you know, human-centered design. It has to appeal to the people that we're looking to serve. And the people that we're looking to serve in adult education want to know, how long is it going to take me? How much is it going to cost me? And what's my ROI, right? They're not in it to win it for going and sitting on a sunny staircase on some university campus with their book bags and a bunch of right? Diverse people around them. That to them is lovely, but it's not necessarily first on their list. Again, remember that opportunity cost for the people that we're serving in the modern era. Okay, so number two, once you get that design team, it could be some internal people combined with some external people. Maybe grab somebody if you're being hosted by that college, grab somebody from the community college and workforce development, right? And say, hey, we want to really be focusing on transitioning folks out of adult education into the community college. And it behooves you because you are concerned with enrollment and strategic enrollment management. And you can situate yourselves as an adult school as a meaningful element in terms of strategic enrollment management moving forward in post-secondary systems. So don't forget that that is really a space that you own. And as traditional age students continue to kind of fall off the path going into post-secondary, right, because they're off in their gig economy or doing something else, it's adult education that can fill that gap for that enrollment management in the local community colleges. So that said, let's look at steps 2 and 3. Okay, so we got our team together. Now we want to look at our target population and identify the pathway program. So there's going to be a couple of different links that are probably just getting popped into the chat right now. Okay, and these are for your CAPE 2021 fact sheets and for the dashboard we're going to be working on today. May I get a show of thumbs up? How many people have been in the fact sheets before, the CAPE fact sheets? Thumbs up or in the chat? I got 2 thumbs up. I got 3 thumbs up. I got 4. Excellent. Anybody, and I'm asking this for a reason because I can give you a quick demonstration, but I don't want to belabor the issue, no pun intended. Is there anybody who would like to do a run through of the fact sheets really fast? Who's never seen them before? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands, so we're going to skip that. I love the fact sheets. I really do. And I do enjoy presenting them. But since we're virtual in this workshop and we're not in person, I don't want to make you dizzy switching from screen to screen. But you know, those adult ed fact sheets, right? You query your consortia. You look at what's going on with whom you're serving. You look at what's happening in your population, right? What's happening by age, by race and ethnicity, by disability, right? And my favorite, which you can see right here in this screenshot, right, is the adult ed transitions page. That is my absolutely quintessential favorite because that is really telling us what's happening with those transitions, right? And we're in it to win it in adult ed, you know, for this goal of equity and literacy, right? And how literacy contributes to better lives. And at the same time, our goal is really transitions. I know I am full force forward with all of the institutions and adult schools that I work with on adult education being that transitional gateway. It's absolutely pertinent in the modern era. So what you see here, when you start to look at these little transitions here that you're seeing on the screen, transitions to post-secondary, transitions to CTE, transitions to non-developmental courses, take a good look at that. Take a good look at it by race and ethnicity, take a good look at it by age, take a good look at it by gender, and see if you can start to itemize, right, that disproportionate impact. Who's in there that should be transitioning, that's not, right, when you look at the actual count of people that you're serving. So next is your pathway program. This is going to be the dashboard. Like I said, it's probably already in the chat. And so I'm not gonna jump to that screen right now. Let's get through the rest of the steps so that we can have a nice linear flow. And then I'm going to jump into a demo of this model. Okay. Step 4 to pathway planning is these accelerated learning techniques. So you have heard me since I started speaking today talk about IET and IELCE plus T ad nauseum. And so I'm hoping that this entire workshop is really feeding into how you can really enhance your current programming or begin programming if you haven't done it before. And why don't we take a pause and ask that? How many people in this room currently have an IET program? Thumbs up is fine. And if you want to put it in the chat what it is, that would be great too. I got a thumbs up. All right. Okay. Oh, I have 3 thumbs up. Excellent, excellent. Does anybody want to unmute right now? How about Cheryl? Your thumb is still up. What are you guys doing over there at El Dorado?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the?
Sure. What is the IET programming that you have right now?
Medical assistant.
I'm sorry, medical assistant? Was that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Very cool. Very cool. Excellent. Medical assisting pathways, right, can go either into the blood and guts, as I usually say, of nursing, right, and technologists, or you can go into healthcare administration, right, because now you know both front and back end. I think I saw Lorraine. I think I saw you give a thumbs up. What kind of IET programming do you have?
I did not give a thumbs up, but we do have pre-apprenticeship programs
Wonderful. In what area?
for heavy equipment logging operators, as well as for accounting.
Those are fantastic pre-apprenticeships. You see, there's so many things that you can do in adult education, right? You can do this pre-apprenticeship model where you're really, again, doing the contextualization. I got to tell you, Lorraine, a heavy equipment operator pre-apprenticeship is just, it's a gold mine, right? Particularly as logistics and transportation becomes so very in demand across all communities. I love that. You can do that pre-apprenticeship model where you're prepping them right before they walk into this non-credit or this credit-bearing pathway. Or you can do that traditional IET model where you're co-teaching, right? And it's happening at the same time. So really good examples. Thank you. So these are all examples for that accelerated learning, right? The pre-apprenticeships that help you prep and make sure that you're successful as you're moving through it. A lot of students, I'm sure, some of you may have had this because I've seen the data in Launchboard. What I noticed is a lot of students coming back to get ASE once they're already enrolled in a credit-bearing CTE certificate. Has anybody had that happen? Has anybody noticed that? Maybe students coming back just for some refresher ASE once they're already in that credit-bearing pathway? I'm not seeing any thumbs up, so maybe nobody in this workshop. But that's absolutely something could happen, right? So you can have the pre-apprenticeship. You can have, and of course, everything that we talk about is stacked and lattice credentials, right? Completely connecting to one another. And what is so very important is that the learner understands that pathway. So as Dr. Toso showed or demonstrated earlier, we have these opportunity maps. These opportunity maps were designed from an educator lens to help educators. It's a tool for educators to help them demonstrate to students, hey, this could be your potential pathway. If you are indeed dedicated and you want to help somebody, you dig on this healthcare thing, you dig on reducing morbidity rates, right, and helping communities become even that much more active, right, and expansive in their health and their livelihoods. Everything connects to one another. You can say, well, if you like the blood and guts, here's one pathway. If you like the technologist, here's another pathway. If you like administration, there's another pathway. If you like nutrition, there's another pathway over here, right? So there's all these different pathways that should all be transparent and stacked together so that when we say stacked, we got to make sure that that learner understands, right, what we mean when we say stacked. The competency-based education, right? We talked about that, pre-apprenticeships and those skills builder courses. We've talked a lot about IET. And again, improved comprehensive and personalized support services. That's what I was talking about. We got to make sure these pathways are transparent. We cannot assume that any learner understands what the next step is after you get a CNA. I'm working with 22 tribal communities in Northern Nevada right now. And we're moving them through adult education pathways and into credit-bearing pathways. And a lot of those Native students, they got their CNAs, they went to go work at tribal clinics, and it's now been a year, and they're stuck. They don't know what the next job is. They don't know what the next job is, nor do they know what the next training is, right? So we can't assume that anybody's going to understand what we perceive just because we're the ones talking to industry. And then, of course, there's online and distance learning. Adult ed is just ramping up left and right about that. Now being able to distance test, right, for your costless assessment and all of that good stuff. So really, really nice opportunities here in adult education. And steps 5 and 6, finally, right? Identifying the pathway system partners. We talked about the workforce system. We talked about adult education sitting in this. You folks sit right in this quasi space where you're a Department of Education funding entity right over here under AFLA, but you're also deeply rooted, right? Or you're deeply rooted in Department of Ed, but you're also now engaged in the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. Can you folks believe we're going to go through another update? I can't believe it. It's a blink of an eye. It was like yesterday that WIOA was getting approved, right? I won't date myself with that one, but it's kind of amazing what's coming out, and we're getting ready for this new update. And I can guarantee everybody on this workshop right now that you're going to see a heavy, heavy emphasis on Title II. With all the complexities of the modern era, with these huge influx of immigration, right? With the complexity of economic systems, and this very disproportionate income that we have, that we're seeing, right? A lot of income in those top 4% of the country, much less income in the bottom 50% of the economy. Getting into those good jobs is so much more complicated. I'm really looking forward to adult education and Title II having that spotlight, because that is what you folks are. You are the spotlight and the highlight and the opportunity that these people need. So as you look at these pathway system partners, again, pick those ones that are the low-hanging fruit, and then pick a couple that you're going to have to work on for a while. Remember, relationships don't happen overnight. And if you're going to be going for funding, right, for any type of federal funding to supplement your work, recognizing that AFLA gives you money to run your programs, but not necessarily design new programs, right? And resource generation, particularly for those rural adult schools, is really, really important. You have to develop these relationships, because that's what the funder is going to be asking for. So like I said, pick a couple too, that's a really good one for you, that's low-hanging fruit, and then find a couple that you're going to start working on for the next 2 years. And you're going to start building that relationship. So when the time comes for your funding opportunity, you're ready to rock and roll. And then finally, identifying tangible pathway systems changes to address those equity gaps, right? Put a little quote up here. Remember, just to keep us mindful of the fact that when we talk about changing systems, we're actually altering some key components in that system, right? And we're shifting it from being a positive feedback cycle that's just repeating itself over and over and over again, right? And we're taking that, whatever the inequity, whatever the barrier is that's being created by that particular element, right? That particular driver, we're changing that driver and we're changing that element so that that system is now going to propagate solutions, right? It's not going to propagate that barrier anymore. So this could be anything from, again, really updating your programs to include that work-based learning. There's no reason why adult education, IET programs, or even pre-apprenticeship can't have work-based learning. Remember, work-based learning is everything now, from having guest speakers to job shadowing to a plant tour to a mentorship club, right? Maybe you get cozy with one of your local employers and you're like, hey, do you mind coming in? Would you be willing to volunteer your time? Maybe, right? A couple hours a month to come in and run maybe like an adult student club that's interested in this pathway. Policy changes, of course. There's a lot of barriers that exist out there, particularly when it comes to minimum enrollment, right? And our community colleges are dealing with funding formulas that requires them to have this minimum enrollment. Well, that doesn't work for us in the rural areas, right? Sometimes there's only 3 or 5 people that are interested in this training, and they don't receive it because there's these minimum enrollment requirements. What can adult education do to help alleviate the burden of those minimum enrollment requirements, right? Maybe it's taking on more of that job training, right? More of that credential training through the IET and IELCE pathways. Again, new workforce system partnerships, employer partnerships, right? I strongly advise you, if you are interested in any particular sector or pathway, you get in touch with their industry association. For manufacturing, if you're in a region where there's a lot of manufacturing, look up your state, I think it's CME, it's the state MEP, it's the Manufacturing Extension Partnership. I'm sure one of my colleagues, Dr. Lefevre, Dr. Toso, can pop in the MEP for California into the chat for you folks so you have it. There's lots of hospital partnerships, right? Tons and tons of hospital and industry associations. New employer approaches to employer engagement, right? Beyond that traditional advisory board stuff, right? There's other ways that adult education can get really engaged. And I do, again, recognize that you have limited capacity and that every single adult school here is probably running on empty and everybody has 2 full plates, if not just 1. But this is where being entrepreneurial with regarding to funding is really, really important, right? And you guys are lucky in the state of California. You actually get your CAPE funding, which allows you a little extra money, right? A little extra change to invest in the development of some of these things. Maybe it's a singular coordinator and all they're doing is meeting with employers and garnering interest and trying to connect to job placement and trying to understand those industry credentials and at the same time they're the career coach for everybody, right? Maybe it's one and the same. So these are all new ways of supporting students. And again, new ways of designing and disseminating instruction. So being mindful, just a linear fashion, who's on your team, right? Are you being a representative? It's not just the teacher anymore, right? It's not just that instructor. There's a lot of moving pieces in the modern era. Get that community college partner over, right? Get that workforce system one-stop partner over. What pathways are really the most viable? What do you have currently? What can you build off of? What can you enhance, right? You don't have to start from scratch. Take something that's already existing. A lot of times what I do with adult schools is I look at what's going on in non-credit at their associated community college. That's often a lot of industry credentials like medical assisting, community health aide, right? Community health worker, home health aide, phlebotomy tech, all that stuff kind of sits in non-credit and it's a real low-hanging fruit, right? Of something that you can enhance and just pull right on into adult education, IET. How did you use your data to determine your target populations and to target your target sectors and target occupations? How did you map them? And what are your goals? What is that goal, right? When it comes to our logic modeling, where are we going with this? Do we want just completion? Do we want transitions? Do we want transitions to jobs as well as school? What do we do? Do we want economic mobility? What is the outcome that we're looking for, right? That we can start to track over time using this data-informed practice. I'm going to pause here and see if there's any questions. All right, I'm not seeing any questions. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing because I'm going to give you guys what you've all been waiting for. And I'm sure half of you, if not all of you, are already in the dashboard. And I have been just this droning voice in the background while you're searching and filtering all these interesting things that are going on in this dashboard. So I'm going to stop sharing there. Let me share my screen again. And we're going to get into the actual dashboard. Thank you. I noticed, Dr. Toso, you're putting in the file shares, right? For the steps. So everybody has that. And actually, let me do one more thing before we hop into that dashboard. Okay. Okay, so this is what it's going to look like. This is how you get there, right? But I'm going to walk you again. With, education and everything we're doing when we serve these adult learners, these learner workers is actually what I taught. The phrase I use is the learner worker. It always helps to be linear, even though we're trying to be holistic. So we put together some steps for you on how to use this dashboard. And then I'm going to hop into the dashboard and actually use it at the same time. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do, and that's not the screenshot here, but you're going to want to query by sector and then by region. Okay, and it's actually it's an occupational cluster, not an industry sector is what the dashboard has. So number one, query your occupational sector, your occupational cluster, and sector and query your region. This is only by California's macro regions. So for those of you who are here from Shasta, Tehama, and Trinity, you're going to go for North Far North. Others, please do go for your macro region. Then you're going to go and you're going to query for the entry level. Remember when I was showing you those graphs and we showed you, largest jobs requiring an associate's followed by highest paying jobs, followed by the bachelor's jobs, right? This is where we start to query and we build the pathway. So I strongly recommend that the first thing you check, just to check it out, is high school diploma or equivalent. See what's going on there. And then come back and check post-secondary non-degree award. And then we can go from there, right? Then we're going to scroll down the dashboard and we're going to query, we're going to filter it for the award type that we're looking for, right? Because otherwise it's just too much. And remember, I'm going to warn you, if you check all the boxes, you're going to get a huge amount of data. And that's why I strongly recommend check one box at a time, look at the data, go back, and then add the other checkbox, right? So that you can visually start seeing and digesting the differences of the jobs, right? As you move from jobs that require a high school diploma or GED into jobs that require a some college or industry credential, or jobs that require an associate's or certificates, and onward and upward, right? So you're going to scroll down to those adult ed schools and your community college schools. So you're going to look at your adult ed regional program offerings, and I will give you this disclaimer. If you are looking at your region and you do not see programs that you know are there, please do contact us, right? We are updating this profile regularly. We try to do it once a year. The what do you see on here was simply what we could gather from scraping your websites. So yet another thing, right, about communication and transparency and making sure that people are exposed to all the wonderful things that you folks do at your adult schools. If it's not on your website, people can't find it. So I'm sure Dr. Toso or Dr. Lefevre are putting in some notes right now into the chat about that update and who to contact if you have additional programming that's not on there right now. So you're going to look at that. And then you're going to move to the right of the dashboard and you're going to query the college by award type. Again, I strongly suggest, instead of going straight for an associate or a certificate or an associate's, you start with non-credit programs and no awards, and then you click that certificate of achievement after that. So first take a look at what's going on in non-credit programming and no awards, because remember, the rhetoric is no award in this dashboard, but what it could mean is that it has an industry credential. That's really what we should have written there, right? But this was from, again, the educator lens. So we wanted to make sure that it was within that lens. Once you click on that award type, you're going to see something churn out like this, which is going to tell us, oh, look, there's 138 educational pathways for healthcare practitioners and technicians. Those are rad techs, right? Phlebotomy techs, pharmaceutical techs. But then you're going to see, oh, there's 47 educational pathways in healthcare support occupations. Those healthcare support occupations, those are your entry-level jobs. That's where you start, right? And then finally, we're going to sequence it out. Right now, we've filtered it step by step. We're looking at, we filtered our region, we filtered our occupational cluster. We're looking at all the data that's coming out there, right? And then we're moving down the road and we're filtering our adult education program. We're looking at our adult education programs that are populating and what we have and what we don't have. And then we're looking over here at our post-secondary community college programming, starting with non-credit and no award industry credentials, moving into certificates and then associate's degrees, okay? So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing and let's go into a live demo here. Any questions thus far? I'm sure there's a ton of questions, but maybe we can answer them as we move into this live demo. And I am opening my screen. I'll give you a couple caveats too. This is built, I believe, in a Tableau system, and it's a public resource for you folks. If you query something and it pops up and nothing's showing up, go ahead and just press the little refresh circle on the top of the page, and that should refresh the entire database and get you what you need. Sometimes educational, entry-level education doesn't always come through fully comprehensive, but again, just go ahead and refresh your browser and that should work. So because we are working with, we've kind of focused on that Shasta-Tehama Trinity region, and we noticed that there's a lot of people here. Let's go ahead and go to regions. So I'm going to walk through this with you. So everything's going to be checked, right, to begin with. So you want to come to where you want to go and you want to click on only. So then it's going to repopulate the entire dashboard with just data from the far north macro region, okay? Notice up here, that macro region living wage shifted. It went from the state of California at 25 bucks an hour to 19 bucks an hour. We provided you with a little link to the MIT Living Wage Calculator. It is where you can query by county or you can query by MSA, your metropolitan statistical area, if you're a little broader. For those of you, if there's anybody in here from San Diego or LA County, those might be options for you to be a little more inclusive. What you're going to get here is also your skills that are pulled from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, ONET. And then you're going to get all of your jobs, right? And so let's go ahead and come to our occupational title, okay? And we're going to do healthcare since we started with healthcare, but we can do a lot. But I'm going to give you some tips in the trade for healthcare. So as you scroll down here, right, where do we go? We get healthcare practitioners and technicians only. But I want to start with healthcare support occupations. Remember, I said this is that largest quantity, but typically not a living wage job. And as we look on here, because I chose only those healthcare support occupations, I'm pulling up mostly jobs that require an entry-level education of some college or some industry credential, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and click a couple more here before I move on. I want to click healthcare practitioners and technologists because that'll help me with my pathway too, right? And then I want to click one more. And this is the unique thing. Behavioral health is a big issue, right? Community health workers, behavioral health liaisons for the system. Those jobs are actually located here under community and social services. These are actual Bureau of Labor Statistic 2-digit standard occupational classification codes. I know that's a lot of words, my apologies. But just remember, when you're searching healthcare, click on the two healthcare support occupations, healthcare practitioners. But if you're also interested in that behavioral health, in the counseling, you want to come over here and you want to click on community and social service workers too. So I'm going to come over here. And now you see what's starting to pop up. Right now we have a lot of registered nurses because those came into effect when I clicked that second box on healthcare practitioners. I want to come up here and we can go back to where we were. Let's go associate's degree only, and let's do post-secondary non-degree award, and let's do high school diploma. So I just did what I told you not to do. I'm going to uncheck that associates, and let's take a look at high school diploma and post-secondary non-degree award. And look, it's kind of popping out a lot of the stuff that we saw when we had only clicked, right, on the healthcare support occupations. It didn't pick up all of the practitioners yet, but it's starting to. Your dental assistants, your pharmacy techs, right? All of that stuff. Now, don't forget about your carrots over here. Your carrots will shift to the next page full of jobs. There's your community health workers right there. This green bar up here is going to tell you of all of the jobs for the 3 boxes you checked, total annual openings in your region, total median wage, and 5-year projected increase, as well as those skills, right? Those skills that we are picking up from, again, ONET in the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. But this is something I want to show you. When you click on a link to that, it takes you to the ONET job description. So this isn't a mystery, right? If you wanted to produce an adult education IET program, IELCE plus T program in community health workers, this is going to tell you exactly what they do and what their technology skills are, right? Can everybody see that as my screen shifted over to ONET? Give me a thumbs up if you can. All right, thank you so much. Okay, so I'll go back over here to the adult education dashboard and I'll give you a hint. Okay, cool. I'm seeing lots of thumbs up. Great. I'm working with an adult program in Northern Nevada that wanted to do a Duola program. For those of you who are not familiar, Duola is kind of like a community health worker, but for birthing, right? And it often will service like immigrant populations or English as a second language population. So a Duola is basically, you know, somebody that's going to help you find where you need to give birth, help you with your, you know, find whatever supplements or nutrition you need, connect with support services. The community health worker is also doing the same thing, but in general across all healthcare, right? So what I suggested to the adult school, because Duolas were such a small percentage of the entire occupational field, even though they were paid, a good job, living wage job. I said, let's combine community health worker with DUOLA and let's do it IELCE, right? English language learning and civics education plus training. Because then we're going to capture more people, more of that population that needs that English language learning and that wants to participate in the healthcare field, right? So again, lots and lots of cool information here. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom half now. So we have our region, we have our occupational cluster. We queried our educational attainment, right? We went high school only, then post-secondary. And let's demonstrate this. We're going to click associates now. And what popped up there? Nursing, right? Nursing starting to pop up here. Let's see here. LVNs. There you go. Your LVNs popped up here. Okay. Once you get to bachelor's, I'm sure you might start seeing more things. There, your rad techs, all that good stuff. Your surgical techs. All that good stuff. And then I haven't touched work experience yet, but we can. Diana, please.
So the minimum wage or whatever that is, macro wage didn't change. Do you have to click something for that to change as the higher level jobs come up, or?
Oh, you're right here. Yeah. So the macro region didn't change because that's simply the geolocation. So that's going to remain the same as long as your region remains the same, north, far north. The minute we swap this out, you're going to get another one. Let's look at San Diego Imperial Valley. That'll be a big difference, right?
Right.
23 bucks. There you go.
I searched inland because that's where I work.
Yeah,
Riverside, San Bernardino, and they're $19 as well.
And that I would suspect because it's that quasi. I won't want to say rural, but it's on the suburbs, right? Of the higher.
Mostly rural.
Yeah. So let's
Thank
go
you.
back to North Far North. You're welcome, of course. So anyway, lots and lots, right? You could spend all day on this with your team, right? You could have an entire retreat with your team on this. Just looking at it and starting to build it out. But that's why we provide you with the opportunity maps, because we know that looking at it this way, it can be difficult to digest. You need to have something to write it down to start building your stackables, right? So as we scroll down here, we're looking at adult education job training, and we're looking in the North Far North, right? So you can see there's 21 job trainings that support healthcare support occupations. And then there's 12 that are supporting healthcare practitioners and technician occupations, right? Pretty typical. You're going to get more of those entry-level job trainings, right? But they start you on the pathway, and you can't be on the pathway to economic mobility and good jobs unless you start somewhere, okay? You can also query by the name of your school. Oh, you can export your data, but you can also query by the name of your school. Sorry, this little triangle here is what's going to help you export data to a spreadsheet. There we go. Once you kind of click to the side of that, you can actually just take a particular school and look at that school only, right? So if we wanted to say, just look at American River College only, that's what would pop up for that versus all the schools. Because remember, one of the major elements in building out these gateways to education and employment and career education pathways, let's not be duplicative. I'm not saying you don't need more than one CNA IET program or MA IET program. I'm just saying be conscientious, right? If your fellow adult schools in your consortium are, you say you have 2 or 3 schools that are already doing, say, CNA or home health aide or medical assistant, jump over into the community health worker space, right? Build something else that could conceivably be stackable there. And then we come over to that college awards, right? So you can search by the individual college, say that you were working with, right? There's American River only, so we can look at building this out in just American River versus the other colleges, and we can see what's going on there. So it gives you the advantage of looking at all community colleges in your region, in your macro region, or just searching the one that you are most engaged with, right? Or that you have the closest ties with. As you can see here, again, it pops out the quantity of educational programs in terms of the occupational cluster. So it's not going to pop out the education and training programs as healthcare and allied health. It's going to pop it out as community and social service occupations, healthcare practitioners and techs, technologists, and healthcare support occupations, right? So let's come over here to award type, and remember it's going to have that little export button again, but we want to come down here to certificate of achievement only. We want to just start there. We want to just understand what's going on here with certs. Well, here you go. So at American River College, you have a couple EMTs. Looks like you can get into paramedic as well. But then from there, it looks like really the certificates that are available at American River have to do with counseling and human services, right? Let's see, gerontology got in here. Let's move our carrot over. We can see a little more here. As soon as it reloads, as soon as it populates. Oh, it's getting a little stuck there. I'm going to go back and I'm going to click on a few. I'm going to go back and click all of them so that you can see the wide variety. There's Shasta, Sierra, and Siskiyou. Excellent. Let's see if that'll help us repopulate. There we go. Okay, so my award type is still sitting at a certificate of achievement, but now we have a lot more options, right? You had your LVN in there too, special needs, there's your paramedic, right? This is the paramedic licensure training. It looks like this is the paramedic studies. So again, something that you would want to dig into. Remember, EMTs typically don't make living wages. You typically have basic EMT, advanced EMT, and then paramedic. So if you're thinking about an EMT kind of approach, you want to ensure there's transparency, right? And that your learner workers understand that this is likely not going to get you that living wage job, but it'll get you on the pathway to that advanced EMT and then that paramedic training, right? And keep them on that training for that training path for transitions. Okay. I think I've kind of been through everything here. Oh, with the exception of work experience, I wanted to demonstrate that. We have 2 here, none less than 5 years. You know, it kind of helps, again, build out the pathway, understanding where somebody's going to have needed some on-the-job training, right? That kind of experience. And let us not forget that your workforce system partners have your WEX and OJT, your workforce experience and on-the-job training, right? Subsidies, they're incentives through the business side that you can work with the AJCC on the business services side and connect with them. For WEX, that's work experience. It's up to, I think, about $4,800 for somebody to come in, and it's reimbursed to the employer for somebody to come in and get some work experience, or formal OJT, on the job training. I know of programs that exist for CNA in that, in multiple medical fields. So I'm going to stop sharing there. Okay, and let's see where we are with our methodology.
Can I ask a quick question before we move on?
Of course you can, yeah.
Would you suggest that we have consortia directors go in and look at their data? And if it's not updated, that's who should contact you?
That's a very nice way to corral. Yes, I appreciate
Claire saying yes. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. If directors want to take that on, absolutely. Take a look at what we have. Write us. Let's make sure that we build this. I love this dashboard. How are you guys feeling? Do you like this dashboard? Is this something that's useful? And thank you, Diane. I'm seeing you nod your head. Any thumbs up? Some heart? Okay, cool. I want to make sure the practitioners are digging this. You know, we spent a good amount of time just kind of building this from scratch, and we wanted to make sure that it was something that's digestible and helpful and usable for you. So good. Please, Dr. Toso.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that in the past, we have sent it out to the consortium directors on a yearly basis, and then they sent it out to their programs. What we send is a form that has, it's basically an Excel spreadsheet with all the pieces that we are asking for, the bits of information, right? The name of the course, how long does it take? What are there certificates, awards attached? We send that out, and that is that at that point, it's up to you all to review and fill out, correct, and send back. And then based on that, we will update the dashboard so that the most current information is, but we no longer are funded to go out and do all the other pieces of information, right? We don't scrape anything. We don't do a lot of contact. So it's really up to date. We do the work of updating it, but it's also the responsibility and energy of you all as program directors, consortium directors, to get that information back to us. it's really great. And as Alexandria shows, it shows you how you can not just identify what you might want to build a program about, but how you can step across organizations, how you might want to build within your organization, within your school, that pathway, so that you don't have those gaps and for transitions, right? You know where you're going, you know, if you've got a great CNA program, but you want to go up to medical assistant, to something else, but you don't have it there, this is a really good way to look in and dig into the information that you have, and that a consistent way of looking at that. And you can do it across your consortium, or you can just do it within the smaller component of who you primarily partner with. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Toso. I love that, because you reminded me that it actually is really, we've made this really easy to update your stuff. You don't have to just send them some random email with, oh, this program's not on it. We ask you the specific variables that we need in order to populate this. So it's really, really efficient. If you could just take the time, and we typically try to do this over the summertime. So what you're seeing here is the results, right? Is basically you're about to walk into an activity to do the same exact thing, right? And you're gonna be using your Jamboards, and you're gonna see the results of here. So this is the results of one of the exercises we did with a consortium. And you can see here, we started with the adult ed, right? Basics, your GED, HSC, ESL, right? You have your entry level jobs here. That really just require that GED or HSE with maybe one additional small credential. You know, food service workers. I'm sure there's some people on the line that have Serve Safe or Safe Serve. I always forget which way it goes. So one of those two, right? That you could get in there. The medical secretary, right? The SERS, the credentialed electronic health record specialist, is something I see a lot of adult schools do, right? And then you get into the adult ed non-credit job training. You could do your medical assistant. You could do your medical record keeping. We were talking about billing and posting clerks earlier, right? You could do something like this, and then it aligns. You can see how much you're going to be earning a year. Certificates are usually, I see community health worker, quite honestly, in both credit and non-credit, but more so now that time has gone on over in non-credit, right? And again, you have your choice. Do you want to buddy up with non-credit or credit? We always want those credit pathways, but non-credit is typically at community college a much more flexible environment, right? To engage in the IET and IELCE plus T programming, okay? And then again, moving upwards and onwards from that, public health science as an associate's degree, right? Rad tech, right? Radiology tech is often an associate's degree. Social and human service assistants, again, an associate's, and then kind of showing people where they could go with this if they did choose to go get their bachelor's. So with that, we are going to be walking into a breakout activity. And Dr. Toso, I depend on you. I defer to you on timing. I am hoping I am keeping us on time. And if anything, have afforded us maybe a little extra time to work in these breakout groups so people can see what's going on.
Yes, thank you. We are in great shape. What we're going to do is send you into some breakout rooms, and typically you'll walk through this process as though you were in your consortium or in your program, and you're going to look at that. You're going to have a blank map. We're going to ask you to explore the healthcare pathway, right? And normally you would bring all that LMI data that Alexandria talked about, who your students were, and you would choose a sector of your own that's most relevant to your context and your local labor market needs. So, but what we're going to ask you to do is just to keep it with the healthcare pathway. We've got a Jamboard for you, and you are going to look for the slide that has your group number on it. And then just as you use with all of your stickies, you're going to post ideas and thoughts, what you have found by going through this process that Alexandria just marked out on the Career Pathways dashboard, right? And so you, in the Jamboard, let me see if I can bring it up. Can I share my screen?
Of course, my apologies. There you go. Yes, and we'll stick that in the chat for everyone.
So here you have, this is your first one. It's just the directions, right? But what we've done is included an example of what your pathway map might look like, right? You can see it's messy. It's not always organized. We're just asking you all to brainstorm through as a way to explore the dashboard and find your courses. You can maybe just be talking about, well, we want to do this. We're looking at this occupation at the adult education level, the job, and then you go to this educational or training program, and that could get you this certificate, which would then lead to the job. You can just begin to explore it that way, as this program did, right? They were really thinking about what did they want to do. They were looking at a lot of different things and where could it lead to, and then what was the AA, and then where might they go on to after that. Then they also talk about, oh, what are those skills that are needed? There's Microsoft Excel, you know, oh, you could also possibly get into the accounts payable. They would need coaching. And then they had questions for themselves, like, where are these gaps? We need to identify the gaps. So this was also used really as a brainstorming process as well. So looking at the healthcare process, looking at the healthcare sector, for whatever region you want to choose, you're just going to dig into it, identify the pathway, the jobs, the educational experiences, and the certificates that might be able to come out there. As you go along, also post questions or thoughts so that this can be sort of, it would normally be a document that you would use continuously and come back to as you begin your career pathway mapping. Are there questions?
Would you like me to open the room?
Yes, that would be lovely. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Mandali, could you bring up the slideshow again, please? Thank you. Super, thanks. And then maybe we can, we appreciate you all digging into this and exploring it. I know we had a conversation, it was interesting, and it wasn't necessarily focused on exactly what the activity was. And we are fully aware of the fact that, you know, you're moving between screens and you're trying to do something which is easier when it's in paper or on paper on your desk, and then you can also look at the dashboard. But for exploring it, I'm wondering if group one would want to share out like what you all did, what did you find? Was it surprising? What was challenging? Just to take a quick debrief of the activity, or if you have questions for us.
I'm going to nominate Lorraine to kind of take the lead, but something that right before we got cut out of the break room, Molly suggested kind of there's a capacity issue with what we were talking about, and opening it up to do some more like online or remote learning, and even involving the regions. So she and I are in different regions, but we could potentially work together to make it easier for our rural and isolated areas.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. One of the projects I'm working on, we've been working on this idea, mainly around IET and IELCE, but also in some states that's really broad, so it includes bridge programming. And we've really been talking about regionalization, right? Where you share the burden of small enrollment, right? Or only being able to offer one opportunity. For example, in Minnesota, it's actually beginning to be a statewide opportunity. I believe it's Ohio as well, also has some statewide opportunities, and then smaller regional opportunities. So I think that's a great idea. And I will give a nod to Alexandria, because one of the programs that's featured is her Northern Nevada program, because they're doing a lot of regional sharing of resources and education. So yeah, it's great. Yeah, it is great. So thank you. I appreciate that. And Lorraine, I totally rolled over your speaking time. So please share.
No worries at all. So we actually explored the path to health information technology and health information management, which kind of combines computer technology skills as well as medical terminology. And when talking about it, we realized in our region, in the North Far North, it is only offered at the community college. It's not offered by any of the adult education schools. They don't have any sort of pathways for medical programs. The focus up here has been the HiSET, GED, high school diploma, ESL, and CTE stuff, because we do have a big rural community with heavy equipment, logging, truck driving, that kind of a thing. So this is but the biggest, I would say, employer around is medical. And there's the majority of positions around here are medical or administrative in medical, which this falls into. But it starts out with just, some basic skills as far as communication, writing, maybe taking some courses in medical terminology and stuff to get yourself prepped, and how it starts out with a general entry level position as like a clerk or a data entry clerk. And you work your way up to a specialist, and eventually you get a certificate, which some places, if you're certified or you're considered a registered medical record specialist, that pays more. It's like having a license for working in the state. So that can lead up to other things. But there's nothing that I know of that goes specifically beyond that. As far as if you got an associate's or anything like that, there's not like another level of it, unless you end up being in charge of the electronic health records system and being the one to implement it and troubleshoot and all that stuff. But it does, you
thank you. That's
interact
great
with
exploration.
insurance and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that exploration, right? Where it leads you down. I mean, we were in a fascinating conversation one time with the funeral and mortuary services, which I knew little about, but they talked about the career pathway and how that went. And then, and then they would say, well, you stop here. And then people would talk about, no, it can go further. So I really appreciate that exploration that you did. In group 2, did you all want to share anything that we talked about?
I think
Julie
the
or
thing
Diana?
that I thought was most interesting is that we are planning on putting together a LVN program. We're trying to get the players in piece. And that was the highest median wage listed on the dashboard for non-degree post-secondary education.
Yeah, thanks. And it's nice to know that you're on the right path. So kudos.
Exactly.
Group 3, anything that you wanted to share out from your group?
So I ended up in group 3 kind of by myself. So Alexandria and I were working through the dashboard some more to try and look at some of the stuff for Shasta and North Far North, but didn't get as far as actually filling out the pathway map before we got cut off. So
that is absolutely fine. Thank you. Thank you for staying with it and exploring it. Really, it was more about exploring the dashboard or thinking through the pathway. It could take a lot of different ways. Were there any questions that people wanted to raise before we move on? All right. We are going to move through the next slides really quickly. They are really a review and some leave behind slides that you can go back and look at, particularly some of the examples of the way people have built their pathways. Everything is available, all the slides, all the maps, all the resources that we've talked about and shown you here in that shared Google folder. So please make use of them. All right, let's just walk through these quickly. Next slide, please. So there are those pathway best practices that we discussed, and I will just highlight again the multiple entry transition exit points, making sure you give your students clear systems navigation support and making that process transferable, and then those certificates, they really need to have those. Second, next slide, please. These are the slides that I hope you'll go back, this one and the next one. Really, the points are made on the slide, but really what you want to look at is how people have built their pathways. For this one from Yavapai, you've got a lot of different options. They don't necessarily go to the same place, but they always flow back to make sure that you are either going upwards for more education, training, or employment. And you can see those very clearly listed on that. And I wanted on this one really is it doesn't have to be within the same industry or occupational cluster, that you can really find interesting ways to weave them back together. Next slide, please. This is another one. This is from Carreras de Salud, which is a really well-known program. What I think is very interesting about it is how, when a lot of people say adult learners, they can't start on a career pathway because they don't have enough English language, they don't have enough skills. The carrera started at the very, very low level, and you can see how they have chunked it out into attainable chunks, and they fill the gaps with little bridge pieces, and they build interest and expectation and planning from the very beginning. So making sure, take a look at that, see how it's laid out, and it's very explicit. Next slide, please. Talking about the models, we talked about those already, but really we're talking about that sweet spot in between where you've brought all of your partners together and we're working together for the enhanced pathways. And the consortium structure in California is so beautifully positioned to do this work with all of the partners. Next slide, please. We know that opportunities, funding and sustainability are always key concerns for you all, and there's some really lovely ones. And I'm sorry, I forgot to take out the upcoming. That healthcare for ELL possibility is out and running. Perkins is really moving to the forefront. I believe we'll really see that in the reissuance of WIOA, as will be ability to benefit is really big in SB 554. If anybody else has other thoughts about who they use, organizations, grants, and lots of braided funding, please pop those into the chat. Next slide, please. And there's nothing like a good planning tool when you're doing a career pathway design. And here's this one will offer you an example of, the prompts, where are your decision points, and then really when you're working with your partners, it lays them all out, and it assigns a responsibility. And the piece that's most important about it is that it allows you all to have a conversation around your common goals, right? So that you are clear and aligned and you have understanding of where you all are going, and it isn't one person thinking they're going this way, someone else is doing something else. So use a planning tool, feel free to take this one, and use it as a starting point. Next slide, please. I want to thank you very much for being here. I'm just curious if there are any other questions, or do you have ideas to share? Looks like not.
There's one question.
Yes. Julie.
Hi, so when I'm looking at the dashboard and maybe you explained this and I missed it, I apologize if so. So if I click on an occupation in our region, like phlebotomist has 18% growth rate in the next 3 years, or within the 5-year period. So if I click on phlebotomist, it goes to a separate website, but I want to see the other dashboard items in relation to phlebotomist. Is there a way to do that?
When you say just filter the entire, sorry, Dr. Toso, are you saying just filter the entire dashboard so you're only looking at things that deal with phlebotomy?
Yes, in this region.
There's nothing that allows you to do that. You're gonna have to read through the list. I'm sorry. Yeah, because it's filtered by the educational level or the actual occupation. What I would recommend is that when you click on the occupational cluster, the occupational title filter, just choose healthcare support occupations only. Yep, there's your phlebotomist right there.
Okay,
So it'll start to narrow for you a little bit.
Okay, so if I go where it says occupational title.
Yep, choose only healthcare support occupations. Because that's falls within that Bureau of Labor Statistics standard occupational classification. That's where phlebotomy sits, is healthcare support occupations. And then if you only check that box and then maybe go over to the education level and do post-secondary non-degree award only. Yep, there you go. There's only about a handful of things that pop up depending on what region you're in. But basically, those are the only 2 ways that you can kind of filter to really narrow. Phlebotomy techs are going to be health support occupations, and they're also going to only require a post-secondary non-degree award.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Wright.
All right, I'm gonna hand it over to you, Lisa. Thank
Sounds good. Thank you, Dr. Toso. Again, I'd like to also, from the whole team and I, extend our thanks for all of you for coming today, engaging, and sharing in with us on this webinar. We did cover a lot of information, and please feel free to contact us. Take advantage of the dedicated time we have to support you in your career pathway programming, whether it's working with the data to identify the pathway or building the programs in alignment to support adult learners or identifying learner needs and recruitment efforts. Again, you have our emails there. Please feel free to reach out. And honestly, if you want, you can simply send me an email. And if I can't answer you, we will route you to the people who can. So we're here for you. And with that, I know that we're at our closing. Mandali?
Thank you, Wested team. You guys are always, you always bring such great information. I know that the tools will be highly utilized. I anticipate you will be receiving many, many emails in the coming days. So we thank you all for spending so much time with us on your Monday. We look forward to having you back with us and sharing more information. Holly Clark has dropped into the chat our evaluation link. We do ask that you take a few minutes to please fill that out. It does inform how we plan our professional development, as well as inform our presenters with any feedback and areas of growth so we can support you better. And with that, we're going to go ahead and close out. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Bye.